And let us begin with Mr. Tom Bauer, who graduated from Cal State University in Pennsylvania with a degree in secondary education with a specialty in math. However, he decided to explore the business world by first accepting a position with IBM in New York. This fact remains important in his future in Lorain schools. Tom's desire to put his degree in math to use and his dream to coach high school football led him to Lorain High School in 1968. Also, it's important to note that his participation in college football, first at George Washington University, then finishing at Cal State, impacted his desire to coach. That summer, a decision was made to have Lorain High become one of the very few schools in the state to have its own computer. Since Tom's resume had a few years with IBM, he became the logical choice to be the first technology teacher in the system. The course back then was called computer math. For the first couple of years, Admiral King and Southview students could take the course by attending in the evening and Saturday classes. I was one of those students. He taught in the tech field for a total of 37 years, first at Lorain High, then at Southview, and finished up teaching Lorain students in early college at LCC. Tom taught the variety of math courses from the beginning, general math, up the ladder to trig and statistics, but his very favorite was geometry. With geometry, he would show real-life situations and how they could use the new skills learned. The same went for teaching tech courses. In the beginning, all students had to learn programming and coding. Many times, students could not understand why they would ever need to learn those concepts, but later, as Tom's career in computers became more useful for applications, he would show students how to do word processing, databases, spreadsheets, and the like. One of his greatest thrills was having students he'd had years before come up and thank him because of something that they learned in one of those classes. Tom's second dream of coaching football was also fulfilled by being totally involved for 40 years, and I could tell you more than 40 years, on the field for both Lorain and Admiral King. And during a short stint after the closing of Lorain High, Tom traveled the state of Ohio as a head scout for both Southview and Admiral King. After retirement, Tom put in 5 years as coach of Whittier Middle School. Recently, he's partnered with myself under the direction of Mr. Joe Bach to telecast Lorain Titan football on WLCS TV 20 and the YouTube channel. Tom has one more significant contribution to Lorain schools: gambling. At his retirement, it was noted that Tom ran every pool in South Lorain except for the one at Oakwood Park. Please welcome Tom Bauer, the first Lorain educator inductee in the Lorain Alumni Association Hall of Fame.
I have a few notes here, but Jay said them most, so I'm down to like one page now. I'd like to thank the Alumni Association for allowing me to tell my story that put me on this podium this morning. I did spend 2 years at George Washington until they dropped the football program, so I had to transfer to California State University at Pennsylvania. And I majored in secondary education, specialty in math, minored in football. But again, like Jay said, after graduation, I wanted to test the business world, so I took a job with IBM up in New York. And all these facts are important as to my career in Lorain schools. After a few years with IBM, I realized my passion was going to be teaching and coaching high school football. So when I got that call from athletic director Ed Siniger and said Lorain High needed a math teacher and a football coach, I said, Ed, I'm your man. So I took the place of Mr. Rob Hayden, who had left for principalship in Lakewood, so I took his place on the football staff. And that year, Lorain decided that they'd like to get a computer in the school. Now, there was only 3 other schools in the state of Ohio that had their own computer in the classroom. That was 1968. So, me being a IBM employee on my resume, they thought I'd be the logical choice to be the first technology teacher in Lorain system. I didn't have the heart to tell them I never saw a computer in my life. I was a purchasing agent for chemicals and raw materials. But the IBM salesman knew that the Akron Children's Hospital had the same computer that we were going to buy. And they didn't have workers from midnight to 8 o'clock in the morning. So many a summer evening, he and I went down to Akron, spent the night learning how to use the IBM 1620, which was Lorain's first computer. So the first, like Jay said, the first class we taught was called computer math. And the prerequisite was you had to have 3 years of math already. So I was getting the elite math students into this class, which prompted a lot of Lorain teachers to say, you know, a lot of those kids are going to be a lot smarter than you on that new computer. I said, hell, most of them are going to be smarter than me. But, you know, I never really believed that there should be a competition between the teacher and the student as to who's the smartest. I thought my job was to inspire everyone under my care to be all that they could be. And I had some amazing results for those first few years when these kids finally got their taste of the first computer. One quick example. I had a student whose trig teacher told him, oh, he's just an under average math kid. But in my class, he wrote a program that would have the typewriter on the computer print out a graph of whatever function got typed in. Now, the remarkable part about that is this is 1970. Texas Instrument didn't invent the graphing calculator for 20 more years after that. This kid was way ahead of his time. Just an example for an underachieving student who turned on to computers. And that's what the Lorain reason for our computers. Now, besides the computer courses, I always wanted to teach some math classes. And I did, like Jay said, I taught the gamut from beginning math, general math, all the way to trig and statistics. But I always liked geometry the best. I always wanted to have at least one geometry class in there because, you know, a lot of people think math is kind of dull. You don't see a real relevance for abstract, advanced algebra in your everyday life. But in geometry, you could always show examples of how you use it. And I always remarked when a kid would come up to me and say, you know, I helped my dad build a deck outside because I taught him if the diagonals were exactly the same, it would be a perfect square. I learned that in geometry. Or the girl who would come and say, you know, I helped my mom pick out exactly how many rolls of wallpaper she needed for that living room because I figured out all the areas for her. You know, so you can see some practicality in math. But speaking of rewarding feelings and having a student thank you for how you taught him or her in class, you never know how a student will appreciate your teaching. I'm going to give you one quick example, one quick story. I was on jury duty, sitting in the front row, waiting to be questioned to see if I get to be on a jury for this trial. Now, the attorneys were Mayor Jack Bradley and his young brother Sam. Now, Sam come running over to me, Mr. Bauer, I knew I wasn't going to get selected, but Mr. Bauer, that geometry course, I had Sam in honors geometry a couple years before that. That geometry course was the most important course I ever took. Even I didn't believe that. Think about it. You know, maybe if he was an engineer or an architect. But I said, Sam, you're an attorney. He said, yeah, Mr. Bauer, but remember how you always made us do proofs? Let me take a poll out here. How many people had math? How many people thought doing proofs was the most important thing you ever learned? I have one person over here, but nobody else. You understand? But that's what Sam said. You know, doing a proof in geometry that you taught us, you know, you take what's given, you add a fact, but you got to have a good reason, or you can't add that fact. And then you add another fact, you throw in another good reason, and eventually, enough good reasons you proved your proof, or you won your trial. So you never know what effects a student is going to have no matter what you're teaching them. So besides Lorain High, we moved over to Southview because Lorain High had the computer, we had the classes. Southview never did. So I had another computer teacher came into Lorain High. I moved over to Southview to put in the same type of course that Lorain High did with the programming. But by that time, we were on individual, every kid had his own computer, little PC. But we did the same kind of programming classes. All right? And adult education for computers were becoming very big in the Lorain system then. And I taught the range from teaching people how to use their mouse all the way to doing internships for local industries. As a matter of fact, Subalika and I team taught a lot of computer classes out at the Ford plant. All right? And then my final destination for teaching was at Lorain Community College, teaching Lorain students in early college. For the most case, I was their first college professor. All right, now let's just real quick. I know we're getting into lunchtime here, but football. I was associated with football my whole career in teaching. First on the field coaching at Lorain High, and then at Admiral King. And then after I retired, I spent 5 years with Ricky Hands at Whittier. I always wanted to coach. And that little stint in between, when I left Lorain High and went over to Southview, they didn't have room on their staff for me. So we started I got a couple ex-coaches, and we started a little scouting group, and we scouted for Lorain High, Admiral King, Southview. For those 5 years, I'd never seen a home game, because we were always in some strange stadium over the state of Ohio working on next week's opponent. So I always tell young people, if you want to become involved in this career of teaching, become involved with students outside of the classroom. If you're an athlete, try coaching. If you're an English major, do the school paper or the yearbook. Sponsor a club. Because if you see students outside of the classroom, you get a whole nother feeling for them, and get another respect for you. And one last thing I'm very proud of. I wanted to bring good wrestling into Lorain. And during my early officiating career, wrestling, I had a fellow teacher, Frank Fiore. If anybody remembers Frank Fiore, he was a fellow teacher at Lorain High, and then eventually became like the godfather of officiating in wrestling in Ohio. But he says, Bauer, officiating is not enough. You have to become an ambassador. You have to promote Lorain schools every opportunity you get. So I wanted to bring good wrestling to Lorain. So with the help of athletic director Fred Churchill at the time, we started the Southview sectional. And for the next 30 some odd years, the very best wrestling in the state of Ohio happened in the gym at Southview. Very best, bar none. And for the younger kids, we started a junior high tournament that eventually became the largest junior high tournament in the state of Ohio. Sometimes we had over 30 teams there at Southview or at Admiral King when we had the tournament there because of the bigger gym. And I think we put Lorain on the wrestling map. So, again, thank you. Right before lunch, again, thank the association.